Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to our program on Kardec Radio. And now, here's our host, Dr. Vanessa Anceloni.
Welcome, dear listener, to Kardec Radio. We are here live at the Chantilly, Virginia studios at Kardec Radio. And if you don't know where it is, it's in Northern Virginia, 25 miles west of Washington, D.C. Yes, we are in the greater Washington, D.C. area, very near to the International Airport of Washington, D.C., the Dulles Airport. We're just 4 or 5 miles away. So if by any chance you stop by and you want to visit us, just let us know. Go to kardecradio.com, contact us. There is a contact form. Come visit us at Kardec Radio. And also, we would like to remind everybody that we are expanding our team of volunteers always. And you can join us by contacting us through kardecradio.com and telling us how you would like to participate and help us out as well. There are many projects, many beautiful things being done at Kardec Radio. We have added lots of programs recently, and soon the new website. By July 4th, the 6th anniversary of Kardec Radio, will be launching a new homepage where you're going to find all the resources and the list of programs we have been having. It's fantastic. We have people from all over the world helping us, bringing Spiritism to you, bringing the teachings that have been life-changing, and talking about transformations and life-changing effects. Today and tomorrow here in our Washington, Virginia group, we are dedicating to understanding more how we can help mental health through the perspective of the Spiritist teachings and much more. You all know that there is a crisis in our healthcare system, and focusing on mental health alone, we can tell there is so much to be achieved. There are many frontiers, and the ultimate frontier is the bridge between spirituality, spiritual tools, and the traditional medical approach in psychiatry. There's little that can be done at this point besides, the psychopharmacology approach, and there's much more. And we have here a person who has, thank God, dedicating herself heartedly to bring this awareness in the world. And we hope you join forces with Emma Bragdon. Thank you, Emma, for being with us at Kardec Radio today. She's here in the studios of Kardec Radio. Thank you, Emma.
It's a pleasure to be here with you, Vanessa. I'm really happy that you invited me. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. And it's a joy to have you here with us at Kardec Radio Studios, because you have been doing unique work. Though the Spiritist movement has been doing, the grassroots work with the people, you are instructing the mental health practitioners around the world regarding the need of a change in the paradigm. How has it been for you overall? Just give us a feeling, Emma.
Well, I want to say that I certainly am very interested in addressing the mental health professionals, that is, people who have already been trained, let's say, in graduate school with a master's degree or a PhD, or even psychiatrists. I want to reach out to them to assist them in reevaluating the system we have now and expanding the system to include more of the value of psychosocial ways of healing, but also spiritual ways of healing, because my sense is that we need not only to look at the physical components of mental health issues, but also the psychological and social components, as well as the spiritual. And this is a paradigm that actually was probably in use many years ago, but fell to the wayside when we got so entranced with the power of the drugs, the psychiatric medications. So actually, I started Integrative Mental Health for You, which is the organization abbreviated by IMHU and found at imhu.org. I started that because I realized that the public itself does not have access to information about this kind of paradigm of care, which works with the biological as well as the psychosocial as well as the spiritual. So there were very few places that people could get information, and I wanted to assist people to be able to Google about mental health issues and get this particular kind of paradigm, which included the spiritual. So we give courses really for the public, but also we give courses for mental health care providers, and we offer continuing education credit for those providers who might need that or be looking for that kind of credit as they take the courses.
That's beautiful. And I'm just typing in here the website again for you who is listening to us, IAMHU.org, Integrative Mental Health for You. This is wonderful because talking about the people who are suffering, who have loved ones who are, every family has at least one, and this is an optimistic perspective, at least one person who is in great need of mental health care. And if you don't have the spiritual approach, you'll be so limited, right? So limited. And we're not talking about a religious approach. We're talking about a spiritual approach, which I remember a discussion by Dr. Harold Canning from Duke University about the importance of making this difference. Emma, you want to comment on this for us, please?
Yes, Harold Koenig, who's a psychiatrist and has been doing a lot of work through Duke University, but also has published many, many books on the impact of spirituality and health, has been one of the foremost leaders in the English language in terms of incorporating and evaluating the place of spirituality in mental health. So I honor him tremendously, and I remember being actually in Sao Paulo at one time and hearing him speak at one of the large Spiritist conferences. And I approached him later and asked him about the tradition that he is most familiar with, which is a quite well-established Christian tradition. Mm-hmm. And I honor that tradition. I was brought up in a Christian household myself. And I was sorry to hear from him that he didn't know much about Spiritism, which is actually a way of practical Christianity. But he hasn't had the opportunity, I don't think, to study Spiritism and thoughts about reincarnation and thoughts about karma that are so deeply involved with Spiritism.
It's interesting you're mentioning this. I see here the courses, the webinars. We really want to recommend to you the webinars at Integrative Mental Health for You. For example, the one on how to effectively support someone in spiritual emergency. As Emma Bragdon is talking about this personal need that people have. Like, we have, when you go to a therapist office, Emma, traditionally speaking, we leave our beliefs outside because usually in any graduate course, there is no actual, now it's changing, but there's no actual training on how to facilitate the bridging from the mental care to the beliefs, the spiritual beliefs or the religious beliefs of the person. And I have found that if we don't do this bridging, it will be a very limited approach to the patient. It's because basically we make decisions founded in our own beliefs. And if we're not considering them, and I'll give an example for those who are listening to us. I remember a therapist who told her patient, And the therapist was not a spiritist, but she knew that the patient was a spiritist, and she understood a little bit about it. So she said, you believe in the entities that help you out, so why not asking now for guidance? And she incorporated that very feature as bringing the beliefs of the patient. And the patient told me, Vanessa, that was so different for me. And it really made a difference because in my daily life, I actually make decisions based on my spiritual beliefs. If I go to the therapist office and they disregard it all, there's little they can do because they are not assessing the body of beliefs that are constantly pulling me to different directions. So when you give these webinars, like for example on spiritual emergency, etc., do you how? Because I know people that come for your webinars, they are not only spiritists; they come from all different walks of life. So how do you approach that when you're talking about spirituality to them?
Well, in that specific course, it's an online 5-webinar course. I do get people from all over the world, meaning every continent of the world. And people, of course, have come from different religious traditions. So we welcome everyone from every tradition and recognize that one thing that is universal for all human beings is spiritual experience. So people may have different ways of thinking about it, but let's say we just consider near-death experience. A famous neurosurgeon, Eben Alexander, wrote about his near-death experience, and as a highly trained scientist, he had never believed that people actually had a spiritual experience if they were clinically dead for a short period of time and then returned with the help of medical science. But he himself had the experience of a profound near-death experience, which made him basically unconscious for about a week. And he came back to report about his experience. But more importantly, he went through a profound transformation as a result of going out of his body as a spirit and even meeting a family member who had died previously. So he met in spirit with this woman, and he came back firmly believing that there were spirits of a higher nature who could be with us and help us, not only in this lifetime, but also in lifetimes that are to come. So he completely changed his way of thinking about things. Now, because of medical science, people all over the world are having more near-death experiences. And of course, they're coming back from these experiences, talking about it in their own language and bearing reference to it through their own particular religious or cultural beliefs. But still, there is something that we can call generically a spiritual experience. And in the same vein, there are more people now opening up to experiences of a psychic nature. For instance, since there's more travel going on, people will go to places that they have never been to before in this lifetime and suddenly have a sense of, my gosh, I've been there before. How is it that I could have this feeling? I feel completely relaxed in this country or in this city in this country. And it seems like I've been here before. And it seems like I know the people. And even the language seems somehow familiar to me. And yet I've never been there before in this lifetime. So more people are having experiences of this nature, and we could call that something that comes through a psychic opening, or an opening of a higher state of consciousness, or the sixth sense becoming activated. And so, of course, it's spoken about in different words, and actually the English language has a very limited vocabulary to speak about these experiences. So one result is people may be having more of this type of experience and yet have very little vocabulary for it and not have any kind of mapping for understanding where they are. And so it's much easier for them to have a sense of being lost with it. However, these experiences, when people have them, are so compelling and can take people into the need for really reevaluating their religious beliefs, their spiritual beliefs, but even their sense of meaning and purpose in life. To go back to Eben Alexander, he was a very well-to-do neurosurgeon, and now he has decided to give workshops to help people move into higher states of consciousness through the use of sound and meditation. So he has really taken quite a turn in his personal life, but he has gone towards a much more profound sense of meaning and purpose in his life. Not to say that he didn't like being a neurosurgeon. I'm not privy to that information, but he very clearly talks about the profound sense of meaning and purpose he has right now to help people to move to higher states of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
As far as I know, he's not a spiritist.
No.
And yet he recognizes that when people have these kinds of profound transformative experiences, they lead to a greater sense of meaning and purpose, a desire to be in service to humankind, to help humankind move to higher states of consciousness. And in terms of mental health, these kinds of transformative experiences lead to a sense of more peace as well. And for some people, even a sense of bliss, such happiness that they describe it as a blissful experience. Because ultimately, these spiritual experiences lead us into a deeper communion with higher intelligence. And that might be Jesus Christ for some people. It might be Buddha for another person. And it might be the angelic realm for someone else. But these experiences lead us into realms that can profoundly impact our mental health and our sense of wellness.
Yeah, that's so interesting. You're mentioning about it all because, it reminds me of the many people who come and ask about what to do when they first realize that their lives have changed. The other day, a friend of mine said, Vanessa, I never experienced that in my life. I have a feeling now that there are more problems in the world than ever before. And they said, maybe that's not the case. It's that you are now aware that these things have always happened, and now you're paying attention to the world. Now you are not in your inner absorption. You are waking up and you're seeing that the world exists. It's like the baby in the womb.
Mm.
Like, all there is the baby and not even the realization of the mother. And then, little by realizing that there is an extension called mother, and then the mother is not actually you, little by little, we come to the realization that there is more than just ourselves in the world. And oftentimes, this transition may happen through a crisis. How often, Emma, did you witness in the past when you were bringing many people to John of God? How many people did you help that were exactly in the cracking of a new life inside of them? Like they were in this spiritual awakening moment or in this true spiritual crisis. Was that one of the reasons why you felt the need to put together a material like this? Because you've facilitated and helped many people in their discoveries of their true selves?
So I did take 60 groups to be with John of God between 2001 and 2012. And for those of you who may not recognize that name, he is a renowned healer who works in a very small village in Brazil. And there will be 2,000 to 3,000 people these days coming to be with him because he has such a powerful reputation as a healer. And the place itself seems to hold healing vibrations. So people are enriched, very enriched by going there. And to embroider more on what you were saying, when people make the step of flying to Brazil to go to this small village to see a man who doesn't speak English and in fact is illiterate. It's a big jump, and generally speaking, they're ready to make a change. The reason I actually went first to John of God is because a good friend of mine who is extremely well educated and had consulted with the best neurosurgeons all around the world asked me, Emma, please go to John of God for me and check it out. See if he might be able to help me as a paraplegic be able to walk again. And after I saw John of God the first time, I said, Jim, I think you should come. And he actually did go for 6 times. But it was a very, very profound time of healing for him. As far as I know, he never gained full access to his legs again. However, he gained a tremendous amount of peace, as well as a much stronger desire to meditate more frequently and connect with the beings of the higher realms that brought him so much peace as well as inspiration. So, but going back to what you were saying, Vanessa, actually my interest in spiritual emergency or spiritual crises began in the early 1980s because Stan Grof, a psychiatrist from Czechoslovakia, and his wife Christina Grof started the Spiritual Emergency Network. And the reason they started that is because Christina herself had had a Kundalini experience in childbirth. Kundalini relates to a powerful energy, again, universal in nature. It resides in every human being, but it's thought to be like a snake, a very powerful snake that resides in the sacrum, which is the lowest bone of your spine. And with certain kinds of spiritual exercises, yoga is one of them, hatha yoga is one of them, this Kundalini energy can rise, and as it breaks through conditioned patterns that hold us in a more limited consciousness, it can create a lot of agitation in the system. It can create a lot of emotions. It can create a lot of physical sensations, some of which can be very uncomfortable for people, and some can be also very liberating. But she had a Kundalini experience during childbirth, and as a result, became quite frightened, and then turned to the medical people who were around her asking for help, and they had no idea what was going on. And in fact, they felt she was having a psychotic break. So they took her baby away from her right at the time she was giving birth and put her in the mental ward of the hospital and started giving her antipsychotics and telling her that she had had a psychotic break and that her position as a mother to her child was really weakened because they were afraid she was very mentally ill. So based on that experience, she went along in life trying to sort out, was she mentally ill? Did she need to take drugs or not? Or was she actually opening up to a higher state of consciousness and needed other people to speak to who had had the similar experience and could actually help her just stay grounded and at the same time move into higher states of consciousness, which is really an evolutionary crisis, which we can call a spiritual crisis. So because hatha yoga in particular has become much more accessible to all of us, I mean, we can almost take a yoga class on every street corner these days in the United States. More and more people are experiencing Kundalini awakening, either through yoga or through meditation, intensive retreats, also workshops that are given in breath work that allow people to break through kind of inhibiting patterns they've had before. And so people are breaking into states of higher consciousness. But here in the United States in particular, we don't have many maps for what this is all about. And if we turn to people who are trained in medical science, we turn to people who also haven't been given that kind of map for what's happening to them and what they need and what's the most appropriate kind of help for them. So, unfortunately, people who are having these kinds of experiences may very well turn to an emergency ward or a medically trained professional and be given medication, which may be superb if they can't sleep, for instance, for 2 or 3 days because their system is so animated. However, if they're given the idea that they've actually have a mental illness and they need to think about continuing on medication for the rest of their life because, for instance, they're having a manic episode, then that can really be detrimental for their evolutionary process as well as for their mental health. And that's one of the reasons I'm teaching this course and making it available to people all over the world.
Yeah, that's fantastic. You see, dear listener, it's opportunity for everybody to team up. You may be asking, how can I make this more mainstream? How? Well, go to the website, imhu.org, and share the news. The more people that get to know of it is, the better it is. And take the courses, share the courses with others. It's a very resourceful website, and Emma Bragdon, she's going to talk more about this after the break on a textbook that she edited together with beautiful minds that have been diligently working at that end as well in Brazil. Okay? So right now we're going to give you a break, and soon after this we're going to be talking more to you about mental health, spiritual crisis, and the solutions that already exist in this planet.
So. Each heart is like a parcel of spiritual land. Many will be buried by the stones of prejudice at the side of others who got entangled by the thorns of illusion, needing enormous time to break free. However, think about the good land not in use. This is where elements that generate inertia are found. Abandoned lands, orphaned lands, creatures who are anxious for the fertilizer of faith, souls who beg for a modest garden of hope and comfort. These troubled, forgotten lands will often look for you. Your vision will open up through the fatigue of the parents where pain manifests, tortures, and consumes, through the disillusionment of your sad fellows who carry in their hearts the ashes of their own dreams, through the problems of the child who is consumed by revolt, through the trials of your brothers and sisters who cry smiling so that you may not see the debris of their resentment. If you can already hear the sublime sower proclaiming, "Sow, sow," you know that charity is the sun that sweeps the shadows. You bring within you the gift to sprinkle comfort. You can pronounce the blessed word. You can pour what is left from the purse, transforming the coin in a prayer of joy. You have the strong arm which lifts up the fallen. Your fingers are capable of mending the strings broken by suffering in others' hearts, attuning them to the sound of the fraternal music. You have the privilege of sharing clothes you no longer need with those less fortunate. Nothing hinders you from helping the sick. Nobody prevents you from building in the road the good for those who are here and for those who are to come. Do not deter yourself in the emptiness of the shadows. Plant truth and light, joy and goodness. If you perceive the voice of the sublime sower, you will hear him at each step of the way, confidently saying closer to your ears, "Work while you can, and sow." A little more You are under the impression that you have exhausted the stock of all your resources in a particular work of love. But if you persevere a little more in your devotion, no one can predict the laurels of light that will shine in your path. You are sick and intend to obtain a prolonged leave. But if you persevere a little more in your service, who can predict the treasure of new energies which will appear in your way? You met huge difficulties in the exercise of good deeds and wish to run away from them. But if you persist a little more in the building of benevolence, who can predict the triumph that your vested hours will collect from the living sources of charity? You believe you cannot tolerate the inopportune friend, the disobedient daughter or son, the thoughtless brother or sister, the fickle wife, or the foolish husband. But if you withstand a little more the difficulties in your household, who can predict the extent of the joy that is to reach your home? You assume that misfortune is your destiny and cry at the door of despair. But if you cultivate a little more fidelity to your own obligations, who can predict the magnitude of your success in the tomorrow which draws closer? You experience enormous fatigue and do not wish to hear a long-winded friend. But if you persevere a little more in your sacrifice, who can predict the fruits from the harvest of blessings that will come from your brief minutes of courtesy? Notice that you too, in the pursuit of anything, demand incessantly a little more goodwill, a little more cooperation, a little more time, a little more kindness from your neighbor. Genius and patience are never ending. It is fair that you wish a little more happiness. For this, it is necessary that you play a helping part in the happiness of others. Be aware of the lessons of life, and you will understand that to be victorious is to work always in accordance with your duty and to serve a little more.
Yes, dear listener, a little more understanding. That's the message we were talking about right here. And we're preparing for a day of workshop in Washington, D.C. We've started this nucleus of Spiritist teachings and practice in D.C., in the Quaker's house near the DuPont Circle. So once a month we're there. For now, it's once a month. But you know, like the Spiritist out of Virginia, we started once a month 10 years ago. And here we are, thank God, full service. Yeah, I mean, we wish we could be 24/7. That's the goal. As Chico Xavier said, the center should work 24/7, materially speaking. We'll get there one day, and you can join us. You know, Spiritism is spreading as we speak. Everywhere we travel, we see more and more groups being formed, more and more centers being opened up, more and more materials being translated to several different languages. And it's just fantastic because Spiritism is one of the ways people can um, find a safe approach to taking care of their mental health as well. But when people are in crisis, like nowadays, many people are going through the ultimate crisis. What do they do? You may be asking. So tomorrow, Sunday, if you're listening to this on demand, you'll be able to watch the video at Cardiac Radio that we're going to be webcasting Emma Bragdon's workshop in Washington, D.C. But if you're in the area, come on over because we're going to have Emma Bragdon doing exercises. She can tell us a little bit more about the plans for tomorrow, but we're going to address the very, very topic of mental health crisis, and the spiritual crisis, the tools that are at hand. What can you do? How many people call us talking about, oh, my loved one is suicidal, or I feel so depressed, I cannot do anything, I'm stagnated, and then medications. Oh, my doctor's telling me to take this medication, but I feel it's much more than just the physical. So how can I address it? Can we have a multi-dimensional approach to it? We would say not only you can, but you should. Do not disregard medicine, but add to the pile of your inner workings what we're talking about. Right, Emma? Would you like to share a little bit about the plan for tomorrow at the workshop so people can get to know more what we're going to be doing there? It's about the spiritual crisis, like your webinar.
Yes.
Spiritual emergency.
So, as I understand it, from 2:30 to 4:30,
yes,
we'll be at the Quaker House in Washington, D.C., near DuPont Circle.
Yeah.
And my plan is to show some colorful slides that really illustrate what is this thing we call spiritual emergency. I really think that so many people right now are in a kind of evolutionary crisis. So a spiritual emergency does not just describe the people who are having these big psychic openings or kundalini experience or near-death experience, because those people are actually a very small fraction of the wider international community at large. But if you look at the world at large now, perhaps we're all in an evolutionary crisis. In other words, people are really in a situation of great stress, and they're looking at what is meaningful for me, what is my purpose in life, and what can I do to impact the kind of values that are coming through on an international level right now. It seems that in some countries there's a real challenge as to, is it important to tell the truth, or is it important to manipulate an angle for more material wealth? What's most important? And so there's a kind of crisis of integrity, I think, that all people are feeling. And as we sort things out and move, hopefully, towards greater integrity and allowing people greater meaning and purpose in life, and finding a form that works for them to find meaning and purpose, then we will have moved through this evolutionary crisis. But at this point, many, many people are feeling that kind of stress, perhaps especially in Washington, D.C.
Oh, yeah.
So I grew up actually in this area in McLean, Virginia, so I feel very attuned to what's going on here and what it's like to live close to Washington, D.C.
Yes.
But there are many stresses in the world today, and the good news is that we also have information coming from many countries. So as people start looking for options for mental health care, or options to find meaning and purpose, or to find a meditation that works for them, or to find a spiritual practice that works for them, they can access so much online through Google and access so many opportunities that weren't available to us before, because we were more rooted in our community and limited by what our community would offer us. So here I am, a North American, speaking with my friend Vanessa, who is 5 generations of Brazilian Spiritists.
Yeah.
And I also do a meditation that was born in East India that is, by all estimates, 3,000 to 5,000 years old, and weave all of this together. So I think more and more people are doing this in order to answer their need to find meaning and purpose, and also find community, and also find grounding. So one of the things that has impressed me so much about the Brazilian Spiritists is that they know fraternidade, or that sense of peer support and community, is all important in terms of helping us to feel grounded and giving us a place to connect with other people who have a similar sense of meaning and purpose as our own. And it's come to my attention through all of my studies in psychology that finding a community of meaning and purpose and becoming part of that community for study and ongoing meditation is one of the most stabilizing things that can happen for a person in terms of managing their mental health.
That's beautiful. I love you for saying this. It's so comforting because, Emma, if I were not doing the Spiritist works in the U.S., I don't think I would be able to stay here. I love the United States. I became an American voluntarily in this life, and I understand why it had to be that way, being born in Brazil and then coming here, and I'm honored to be here. I'm learning so much with the powerful identity of America, which is trying to be destroyed, but we won't let it happen. We won't let it happen. Not any administration in this country will be allowed to destroy the foundation of this country, which is sacred. But I agree with you. The connection that we create, the sense of community that we have, it's so vital that it really gives us this vitality to keep going. So I think that's one of the main things that were brought to us through the Spiritist teachings. It's this revitalization and this reassurance that we need to grow together. That you individually, you are important, but the group is the more powerful. Is where we draw the meaning of our lives. We are raising kids nowadays, Emma, with a reverse, with the reverse knowledge that, oh, you're great, you're the best, you should be the best. So pushing them away from the world. And then we're seeing these teenagers going really, they are lost because we push them so much away from the actual meaning of being together, then now we have to bring them back in and say, it's okay to be in the group. You belong to society. You are not an appendix of it, etc. So I think at all ends, I would say parents need a lot of support regarding mental health as well. And they need spiritual tools and a spiritual community to really feel that they are not alone and that they are together, and they should be teaching their children that the world is friendly in spite of the fact that the world is being challenged. As you said, it's an evolutionary crisis. How beautifully said. It's so meaningful to us. And if you're listening to us and you have a question, you can either, I know there were listeners here waiting, and forgive us for not being able to open the line, but come back, ask your question, and don't hesitate, because maybe your question is somebody else's question. And we are here with people from around the world, even spiritists, who go to spiritist centers and they don't know that they can find a pathway to their crisis. We have people calling Cardiac Radio, sending emails, asking questions about spirit attachments, which we call obsession, asking questions about depression and suicide, talking about their loved ones who are going in these critical directions and they don't know what to do. So through the Spiritist communities and through the work that Emma Bragdon is leading, you can find solutions for you through Integrative Mental Health for You, imhu.org. And you can also, as a healthcare provider, add tools that are going to be less limiting, more effective in helping your patients, helping the community where you're in, and helping even the healthcare providers. Right, Emma? Because we're human beings. We forget that we provide.
Yes. Yes.
How about that?
Well, I want to say, too, that even though I was educated in graduate school in the 1980s, things have progressed since that time. There's now a different book for the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, and meaning there's a new edition for that. Things change in terms of the way we categorize and we perceive mental illness, and things are becoming more articulate. People are becoming more articulate about what mental health is, even. But we still don't have agreement about what to look for in terms of mental health. And I'm sure people who are spiritists would have a different concept of what mental health is than people who are not spiritists and who might come from a different tradition. So that's not to say anyone is right or wrong, but to say that there isn't a lot of agreement about it right now. And that's important for people to know. So there seems to be more agreement about what is ill health than what is health. And yet one of the things that has come about, especially since 2010, when a book called Anatomy of an Epidemic was published by Robert Whitaker and received many awards, Robert Whitaker actually did a review of the long-term impact of psychiatric medications. And that book basically had a domino effect. In other words, it pushed many other people to write books, publish articles, do studies, really looking at anew at the long-term impact of psychiatric medications. And I, for one, and my organization are not anti-psychiatry or anti-medication, but I think it's really important for those of us, especially facing mental health issues in ourselves or our families, to be very aware that in this day and age, there is research that shows that taken over time, many of the psychiatric medications can undermine health care. And so we really need to look at having a cautious approach to using these very powerful medications and do what we can not to be taking them over the long term, but instead be looking at other alternatives that will be just as effective. Mm-hmm. So there is very competent research now available, and if you're looking to as a place to start, the book Anatomy of an Epidemic by Robert Whitaker would be an excellent place to start. And actually, one of the alternatives he talks about toward the end of his book is a methodology that comes from Finland called open dialogue, in which the family of a person who is troubled will get together with some people who are trained in family therapy, and out of the open dialogue, which is literally the name for this kind of treatment, out of the open dialogue will come a positive, it's not a treatment plan, but a positive direction to go. And one thing that is very impactful to know is that in Finland, about 50 years ago, they had the highest amount of schizophrenia reported in the world, of those countries who report it. And at this point, they have the least. And many people believe that the work of open dialogue is the one that is responsible for this kind of a shift. So there are people in the United States who are using the technique of open dialogue specifically to help people in their communities. And there are also people who are doing excellent training in intentional peer support, which uses many of the techniques of open dialogue to support people in clinics and in hospitals. So this methodology is going out much further than Finland. and certainly in Western Europe and in the United States.
It's very interesting you're mentioning this. So for those who are listening, you can go to the website imhu.org and get to know more information about the webinars. There are free webinars like spiritual emergency, what it is, psychosis, what it is, and there are other ones that can even coach you and to become a spiritual emergency coach. Is that
spiritual emergence coach?
Emergence coach. Okay, just go to imhu.org/courses, and you can get to know more information about this. As we are wrapping up the program for today, don't forget tomorrow, Sunday, June the 11th, from 2:30 to 4:30 at 2121 Decatur Place in Washington, D.C. It's very near the DuPont Circle. It's a beautiful area, beautiful building. And I say beautiful spiritually speaking as well because it's the Quaker's house. They have a beautiful setting there prepared. We're renting out on a monthly basis. And the group who is going to receive you is from the Spiritist Society of Virginia. And they are very loving and caring. And we'll also offer fraternal counseling opportunities for those who want to ask questions in a private setting. We'll be there as well. There will be refreshments, believe it or not. Yes, because it's a special session. It's a special event. Emma Bragdon is going to be there with us, leading us into a new understanding. You know, personally, I have to say this. I met Emma Bragdon in 2004 in Paris, France. How special is that? We met in Paris, so chic, like in Paris, France, and in a beautiful international spiritist meeting. Back then, we have different views of many things, and little by little, we gravitated to this beautiful, heart-to-heart friendship, collaboration, and I certainly admire her work that I think is unique in this world. And as my friend Fred Gouveia, who is a fan of Emma Bragdon, he's one of the directors. He's actually now, I think, the current president of the Inner Enlightenment Spiritist Society in Manhattan, New York. He admires her so much because when we go through mental crisis, we know we need more than just words. We need tools. We need people that really want to create a new system. And it's needed. If you are a healthcare provider, if you're a psychiatrist, a psychologist, a nurse, a healthcare practitioner in general, especially mental health, and you want to go to Brazil to visit spiritist hospitals, psychiatric hospitals that were founded and led by spiritists, still incorporating the traditional psychiatry, but adding many other tools, and to see how it has been effective in treating mental health, contact Emma Bragdon. She has her own website as well, emmabragdon.com, and imhu.org, which is the website for the courses, much more information. There is a library, and she also has a bookstore where you can find books such as the one I mentioned previously. There are books such as The Call of Spiritual Emergency, Spiritism and Mental Health, and many others. Now, let us wrap up talking a little bit about the compilation of this beautiful, comprehensive description of spiritist practices in spiritist psychiatric hospitals and centers in Brazil. Spiritism and Mental Health is a textbook, unique. It doesn't exist in Portuguese, by the way. Okay? So, Emma, what made you, lead this effort? How was it?
That's an interesting question. So I would say I was, as a PhD in psychology, traveling in Brazil and getting to know Spiritism, I was profoundly impressed by the Spiritist psychiatric hospitals, but also meeting individuals who had been trained as conventional conventionally trained psychiatrists or conventionally trained MDs and psychologists, etc., who were also spiritists, who were able to bridge the profound spiritual world that they found through Spiritism with the conventional way of caring for people. And one of the things that it had emerged, it was in the early part of the 20th century, so is definitely not new right now and is actually well practiced, is a kind of spiritist psychiatry. And so after meeting some of these psychiatrists who were spiritists, I was invited to visit the hospital and see how the work went on. And it was very different than what is happening in the United States, because most of what you'll find in the hospitals is oriented around medication, and there is next to no work done in spiritual terms. So I saw people who were in the hospital being treated through energy work, which in the Spiritist frame of reference is called an energy pass or passes. I saw people being treated, and very happily so, with blessed water. I saw people enjoying getting together and do prayer circles and never being forced to participate in any of it, but doing it by choice. I talked to nurses who said that after the energy work, that patients tended to be peaceful for 2 or 3 days, and that did not have to do with increasing their medication, but just having participated in this kind of community event where everyone was given energy work. I also was able to meet people who had had the kind of symptoms that we would have in North America said, oh, well, that's symptomatic of schizophrenia. I met people who had some of those symptoms who actually went on to reverse those disturbing symptoms and recognized that they were actually gifted as mediums, and then were given the kind of training and mentorship that they needed to harness their abilities and become healers and mediums helping other people. So it really brought to mind that we have a huge vacant spot in the way that we treat people in the United States, which means that we don't have the way to recognize people who are actually mediums and healers in the rough, having to sort out what is going on with them internally that is guiding them into that kind of work, because we just have very, very little training to understand that. So the way it's been translated through Brazilian Spiritism is there's some people with repressed mediumicity, is the way it's been translated in English. And I would say add to it, it's repressed sensitivity or repressed psychic abilities. And of course, when we repress something, it turns inward. Think about a potted plant that can't stretch out its roots and then never grows fully either, because it's root bound. So if a person is really limited and doesn't know how to deal with these wonderful attributes and gifts that they've been given, and they inhibit them, it can lead to turning inside, and it can lead to some of the symptoms that we associate with psychosis and schizophrenia. So in the Spiritist paradigm, that can be sorted out, and the people with these powerful gifts can be given the kind of training and mentorship they need. So I wrote the book, meaning I started writing it. I've written a few chapters, but mainly I invited psychologists and psychiatrists and some mediums from Brazil to write chapters describing their work, and some of our foremost researchers in the United States to also evaluate the work and give us a greater understanding of it.
It's beautiful. And it's funny you're saying this, because here we have Dulce Story from Long Island. She's just sending us a picture on Resources for Extraordinary Healing that you wrote, Emma. Thank you, Dulce. You're doing great works there. They have this program for suicide prevention, and they have a program at Kardec Radio as well. and they have an annual event on suicide prevention awareness there at the Long Island Spiritist Doctrinal Studies group. Now, Emma, it's so interesting when you're saying about the repression of mediumship, because even though people were born in Spiritist families like me, funny enough, we don't have that particular training in Spiritist centers. And I remember, though, being born in a family that has, that background, Spiritism is just like second nature for everybody. I remember growing up and since a child experiencing mediumship. When I would do my homework, my mom never was like, why does she like to doing homeworks? It's not because I was weird. It's because it was great. Feeling that my hand was moving by itself, for me, it was fun. It was fun. It gave me that feeling of like going a roller coaster, and then my mom would come back and say, you did your homework and you created more exercises? Why? Go play outside. Do something else. I have 4 brothers. They were playing outside. And then I couldn't explain. And when I became a teenager, seeing spirits, experiencing them talking through me, I didn't go crazy because I had the resources at hand. I could figure out by myself. But there are families, sometimes they are not prepared to pick up those signs in a child, in a teenager, and lead them into, educating their mediumship. So I would say knowing about Spiritism can only help you if you're coached to observing the signs and use it. Because I remember for the longest time, I was dealing with things, and when I was a teenager, seeing a homeopathic doctor who was not a spiritist in Brazil, I was naturally relaying to her that, I was hearing X voices, but it was not disturbing me. I was just describing my experiences. She turned to me and said, Vanessa, you're schizophrenic. And I said, I know I'm not, because I'm a spiritist and I'm a medium. I'm not telling you this saying it's a problem for me. I'm just telling you what's going on with me emotionally, and that I have these interactions. And for her, she was like puzzled. Nowadays, she's a good friend of the family. She's treating family members, and she says, I recall that episode with Vanessa that I mentioned that to her, and now I understand things from a different angle. And thank God she didn't listen to me. And I said, I respect every physician, but we were raised, thank God, in our family saying, people won't understand what you feel. People will not understand what you perceive, so you don't need to say anything. You just go by your life knowing that what you're seeing is more than what people see, but not necessarily you're different. They just don't know that they're just alike.
That's a beautiful story, Vanessa. Very instructive as well.
Right? So that's why I admire your work as well, because experiencing it in my own body, my own life, I can only imagine the many children that are being born, the many teenagers that exist in the world, and adults who have their repressed mediumships. They don't know how to decode it. And their families don't understand it either. And there is so much emotion going on that is not even theirs. They don't know what to do with it. And it may be so disturbing if you don't know how to handle it, that you can either kill yourself or kill somebody or go completely dysfunctional in your daily lives. And you shouldn't. So that's why this work has to go to all the places in our planet. And if you're listening to us, I feel calling you to the duty of sharing this website with at least one person in your network. Go to ihnu.org. You may be saving a life. Each person has a network. If you share to one person, you're talking about the spreading of this news to many more people in this world. And if you have Facebook, you have at least 1.5 billion people connected there. This is not about selfies. It's not about sharing about your life. It's about connecting to the world and making the world more accessible to you and making yourself more connected to the world. So if you have resources and you're on Facebook, share imhu.org. And tomorrow at Cardiac Radio, we'll be streaming the workshop on mental health crisis, spiritual emergence, and the tools, the exercises that Emma Bragdon is going to share with us. And you can be connected to us. If you're far away, if you're close, don't watch on Facebook. Come to us right there at the Quaker's house. All right? Emma, your final comments, please, as we wrap up the program.
Well, I wanted to, first of all, invite everyone who is listening to sign up for a free newsletter that comes from imhu.org. And the way to do that is you can just go to imhu.org/blog, B-L-O-G, and there's a sign up there. And as a gift to you, also, we give a book which is called Deliberately Seeking Mental Health, which is kind of a satire, but with some very funny cartoons in it. But it's also extremely informative about how we can, our next steps in moving towards greater mental health. So I want to thank you, Vanessa, for inviting me. It's really been a delight to be here in your radio studio, and I honor your work and the tremendous work you've been doing over such a long period of time to educate people about what Spiritism is and the resources that it holds. And I wish you all the best as you go on further.
Thank you, Emma. So, friends, this is the beauty of these teachings, the beauty of being here with you, that we make new friends and friends for the good and to do the good. You know that the world is in need of a helping hand, and you can be the helping hand. Just share these resources, and you'll be helping people all around the world achieving these beautiful opportunities of healing, of mental health balance. It's the optimal health, as Emma Bragdon publishes in her website. So to Dulcie Story, who is here, she's saying that she's reading the book to help her son. Thank you, Dulcie. I'm sure that Emma Bragdon has a lot to contribute, and it's worthwhile bringing her to your event there. Okay, this is just a tip from us here at Cardiac Radio. A big hug to you, Dulcie, and big hug to all of you, Shane Martin, John Del Rosa, and many other friends whom I know are listening to us live and made themselves noticeable here. We wish you lots of blessing, and keep sharing the good, because it's going to make good to somebody in the world. Thank you.